What is the difference between civilians and combatants in asymmetric conflict? Imagine a battlefield where the lines between who is fighting and who is not are not so clear. In many conflicts today, especially asymmetric ones, this is exactly what happens. Understanding who is a civilian and who is a combatant can be complicated but is very important under international humanitarian law. Civilians are people who are not part of the armed forces or armed groups involved in the conflict. They do not take part in fighting and are protected by law from being targeted. Civilians include everyone from children and teachers to shopkeepers and farmers. They must be kept safe from harm during military operations. The law says that parties to a conflict must do everything possible to avoid harming civilians or damaging civilian objects like homes, schools, and hospitals. Civilians are also not allowed to be used as shields or to hide military targets among them. Combatants are members of the armed forces or organized armed groups involved in fighting. This includes soldiers, militias, or volunteer fighters who are part of the conflict. Combatants have the right to participate directly in hostilities. Because of this, they can be lawfully targeted by the opposing side. If captured, combatants are usually given prisoner of war status, which grants them protections like humane treatment and the right to communicate with their families. In traditional wars between states, the difference between civilians and combatants is usually clear. Soldiers wear uniforms, carry weapons openly, and follow orders from their command. Civilians do not take part in fighting and are easy to distinguish from combatants. But in asymmetric conflicts, things get tricky. One side may hide among civilians, not wear uniforms, and use guerrilla tactics. They might launch attacks from civilian areas or blend into the population to avoid detection. This makes it hard for the stronger side to tell who is fighting and who is not. Despite these challenges, international humanitarian law still applies. The principle of distinction requires all parties to tell civilians apart from combatants and civilian objects from military targets. Attacking civilians or civilian objects is always forbidden. If civilians take a direct part in hostilities, they temporarily lose their protected status. This means they can be targeted during that time but must be protected once they stop participating. In practice, this means parties in asymmetric conflicts must do their best to minimize civilian harm. They should use precise weapons, choose attack times carefully, and warn civilians when possible. Even when combatants hide among civilians, the law expects all sides to respect these rules. Violations can be prosecuted as war crimes, even if it is difficult to identify who is responsible. Protecting civilians remains a core goal of international humanitarian law. Even when the lines are blurred by tactics used in asymmetric conflicts, the law insists civilians must be shielded from harm. Only those directly taking part in hostilities can be targeted, and all parties should always work to reduce civilian suffering during conflict.